So should you move to Atlanta, Georgia in 2025? Now, you may not have a choice, right? A lot of my clients are being moved here, relocated due to their jobs. Some have important family issues that are forcing them to move to the area. And for those folks, maybe this video will help you either get excited or not so excited about moving to Atlanta. For a lot of the other clients that I have, they have been looking at the Southeast in general for cost of living, climate, and a lot of reasons. And maybe they're trying to decide between Atlanta or another great city in the Southeast, in which case this video should be very helpful to make that decision. Or maybe you don't have any immediate plans to move. You've just been interested in Atlanta. You could see yourself either visiting or moving here, and you want to know if you would like it. So we are going to go through today. You might like it if, you might not like it if. And I'm going to give you some reasons why you might like or not like it. We're going to talk about other major cities in the Southeast that a lot of people choose to move to over Atlanta or choose Atlanta over. And I'm going to give you some differences or similarities to help you make this decision. And then I'm just going to try to encapsulate everything for you just really simply so you can get to the essence of what it's like to live here and if it's maybe something that you want to pursue and research going forward. So jumping right in, you should move to Atlanta if you like a mild climate. Now, everyone has different climate preferences, but I really think Atlanta has the best of all worlds. You have a mild climate overall, but you do have 4 distinct seasons. It's not like Florida or Southern California where it's the same throughout the year. However, winter is very mild. The recent snowstorm aside, we very rarely ever get snow or even below freezing temperatures here in Atlanta. Usually it's just cold, wet, and rainy for a few months out of the year. Really just enough to make you appreciate when spring comes along, and spring is a fantastic season. Incredible climate, usually in the mid 70s, a little bit rainy, but lots of sunshine. There's a lot of sunshine in the Atlanta, Georgia area. So if you're coming from the Pacific Northwest and, we've got to cure some depression, the sunshine is going to help a lot. A lot of people will tell you the summers are unbearable. And, depending on where you're coming from, it may be difficult your first summer, but really it's not that bad. Yes, it gets extremely hot and humid, especially in the peak summer months. However, the majority of summer is just nice and hot and sunny and beautiful weather. And fall is probably my favorite season in Atlanta, Georgia. It's nearly perfect and it's long. I mean, we go months without me ever having to turn on my air conditioner or heat because it's just middle of the road, 70s, high 60s, a nice breeze, and again, lots of sunshine. So I think the climate is fantastic, not to mention, and we're gonna talk more about this later, but no natural disasters to speak of. And people are always surprised when I mention that, but it's really true. Now, yes, we technically have dealt with issues from hurricanes and had a tornado touch down randomly years ago that did cause some damage, but practically speaking, natural disasters are not going to factor into your day-to-day life living here as they would if you lived in Florida, where you're on hurricane alert, or in Southern California. They're dealing with wildfires, they deal with earthquakes, all kinds of stuff. So if a mild climate with lots of warmth and sunshine and no natural disasters appeals to you, Atlanta might be a great place for you. Next up, you should consider moving to Atlanta if you're looking for job opportunities. One of the reasons why Atlanta has grown leaps and bounds over the last 10 years is because of our economy. And I think the secret sauce is that it's a diverse economy. We are not dependent on shipping or technology or banking. We have all of those and more. Obviously, film and TV has grown here quite a bit. We have a huge healthcare industry here. And another huge driver of these big technology companies is all the amazing, high-level, diverse tech talent that we have here, not just because of the big universities like Tech or Georgia State or Emory or whichever one, but because of the historically black colleges and universities that are developing top tech talent. This is the reason why Google and Facebook are putting down roots here, because they don't just want tech talent, they want diverse tech talent, which we do have. So anyway, extremely diverse job industry, 17 companies headquartered here that are in the Fortune 500 and around 25 overall headquartered here that are in the Fortune 1000. So if you're looking for job opportunities, I think this is one of the best cities in America that you can look. Depending on what your industry is, of course. This isn't going to apply to everyone. We have banking, healthcare, IT, TV and film, transportation and logistics. Big companies like Delta, Coke, UPS, it goes on and on and on. So this is a great place to start or jumpstart your career. You should move to Atlanta if you're a nature lover. Okay, Georgia is an absolutely gorgeous state, and you don't have to travel far outside of Atlanta to enjoy that nature. We have so many great rivers like the Chattahoochee flowing right through the city. Incredible mountains that you can hike, Arabia Mountain, Stone Mountain, Sweat Mountain. North Georgia has some of the best nature that you can find, the Blue Ridge Mountain Range. There's vineyards in North Georgia, not a lot of people realize that. Personally, I enjoy whitewater kayaking, and the Southeast is one of the best places for water-related hobbies, especially river-related hobbies. Not only is North Georgia readily available from Atlanta, but it only takes me 2 hours to go up and paddle the Ocoee in Tennessee. So if you like to be outdoors, if you enjoy nature, this is a great place to live. Not to mention that we are a city in the forest. So even when you are in the heart of Atlanta, you're gonna enjoy the beautiful tree canopy. I love it. It creates an incredible atmosphere. It's not good for allergies, but it's pretty to look at. So you should definitely consider moving to Georgia if you're a nature lover. You should consider moving to Atlanta if you're into festivals and overall lots of things to do. Now, it's a major American city, so of course you're gonna have all the typical things that you would find, your major sports teams and arenas, endless amounts of restaurants, bars, and retail shopping. But in Atlanta in particular, we love our festivals here. All year round, there is some big festival that everyone is gearing up for, depending on what your interests and flavor are. We have Pride Fest, we have Shaky Knees and Shaky Beats. There's food festivals and Halloween festivals and all kinds of music festivals. There's Dragon Con, which is one of the biggest that we have each year. So whether you're a music fan or a food fan, you just like being in large groups of people, big crowds, centered around some sort of event, this is a great city for you to live in. There are so many opportunities to be outside, be social, and enjoy whatever your interest or hobby is. This is a fantastic place to live if you enjoy festivals. All right, so those were some reasons why you maybe should move to Atlanta. What about you should not move to Atlanta if you hate humidity and bugs? Now, this should seem obvious. It's the Southeast, and no one really likes humidity and bugs, but this may be a deal breaker for you. Now, the humidity I mentioned really only comes into play in a big way in the summertime, and only really crushing humidity for a couple months out of the year, but it can definitely get stuffy here in Atlanta. It's, very different from what you find on much of the West Coast, so you may have trouble if that humid air bothers you. And we've got lots of trees, lots of forest, we've got lots of bugs, okay? You can't be a city in a forest without bugs, unfortunately, and we do deal with cockroaches and palmetto bugs, and the ones that I hate the most, mosquitoes. They love me, and it's a battle not to get absolutely decimated by mosquitoes each year. So humidity and bugs are just a reality of living in the Southeast. It's not just an Atlanta problem. You're going to deal with this anywhere in the Southeast. So if you know you have to be in the Southeast generally, this is probably not a good reason to cross Atlanta off your list, because you're going to be dealing with it elsewhere. But if somehow you didn't know about that and you're looking for a certain part of the country to move to or visit, just know you will be experiencing humidity depending on the time of the year, and bugs regardless of the time of year. You should maybe not move to Atlanta if you want to live in an ultra progressive city. Now, we're not going to get political here, but I do just want to talk broad strokes because this is practical information for people to help them make decisions. Now, obviously, like most major American cities, the city of Atlanta itself definitely skews more to the left side, more progressive and liberal. However, overall, the state obviously is leaning more red, and that was confirmed even more so in the last election. But this will come up practically for you, with the laws and how you feel about those laws and how they all affect your day-to-day life. For instance, in the state of Georgia, I've mentioned this before, you do not need a license to carry a gun. So gun ownership is obviously extremely popular and prevalent here. That is great for some people and it bothers other people. And just generally speaking, as someone who grew up in New York and was in a bubble of very, left/progressive community, living down here has been quite different in the sense that I'm just around more people with different points of view, and that's totally okay. But you should definitely be a person who, can at least tolerate being in close proximity if you're on this side of things to the other side of things, because we commingle here in Atlanta, and fortunately I would say for the most part most people know how to act and know what conversations to have or not have. But I just don't want you to be shocked if you move to Atlanta and you expect it to just be this bastion of progressivism. I suppose there are some elements to which that's true, but we're in Georgia, we're in the deep South, we're in the Bible Belt, so it tends to lean more conservative and religious, and that obviously has a big effect on the laws that are passed and have already been passed that will affect your day-to-day living. The other piece of this, which really goes beyond where you land politically, would just be urbanization. The city of Atlanta itself, again, putting politics to the side, because I see this issue certainly on both sides, is just a pushback against putting some measures in place that will prepare us for the huge influx of population that we're expected to have by 2030. And specifically, I mean funding public transportation, which, MARTA has not done themselves any favors with managing the funds that they have been giving. I'll be the first to admit that. But just this is just my anecdotal perception. Whenever people want, it's very interesting. People want less traffic and more affordable housing, but they seem to not want density or public transportation, which just personally baffles me. And it can be frustrating, especially when you're in the city and, there are parking lots and vacant land and single family homes on huge acreage, where if we could tweak zoning laws or, any number of things, we could increase density. Certainly when you get outside of Atlanta, there is no interest really in expanding public transportation. So all that to say, this is not Portland, right? This is not an ultra left progressive urbanization obsessed city that you might find in other parts of the country, so just be prepared for that. You should not move to Atlanta if you're working with a very small budget and you need to buy a home. Now, unfortunately, just a few years ago when I got started in real estate, this was absolutely one of the best places to come purchase a home for not even under $300,000, under $200,000, if you can believe that, not too long ago. Unfortunately, that is no longer the case. Now, if you're okay being in a very rural area in the country, you can still get by in a very good budget here. But if you need to be in the city or inside the perimeter, or even really short driving distance to the heart of the city, finding something under 200 is going to be nearly impossible. And we're talking single family detached, right? If you need a studio or a 1-1 condo, obviously you can go at a much lower price point, but I'm just speaking to the broadest audience here. That $300,000 budget that used to work wonders for you is now a $450,000 budget to get the same thing, not to mention how high interest rates are right now. So it is comparative. If you're coming from LA, you're certainly going to get more value for your dollar. But if you have dreams of being a homeowner and you're hoping to move to a city specifically to do that, which I think is a fantastic idea, depending on your flexibility, I don't know that is a reason any longer to move to Atlanta. You can find your spots, and if we're talking renting, it's going to depend on what you can tolerate in terms of maybe you're just renting a room versus renting an entire house. I still think there's pretty good comparative value with renting, just because I know that you can still rent an entire house in some areas for $1,500 to $1,600, and that's like a 3-2, and now you're going to be paying all the utilities on that, and you're going to be maintaining the lawn and whatnot. But I haven't seen that in many other cities, so I'd say rental. And the rental market is softening a little bit, so I do see some good value still in rents, even though I do know they have increased quite a bit. But if you're looking to buy a single family home, unfortunately, we are not that bastion of affordability that we once were. So that shouldn't be your only reason to look to move here. And lastly, you should not move to Atlanta, Georgia if you hate driving and you're looking for a dense, walkable city. We are known for our sprawl. It's not quite as bad as Houston, but this is not New York City. Not even close by a long shot. There are very few walkable areas here. There are very few large walkable areas. We have a lot of small pockets of walkable areas, which is one of the reasons why the Beltline is such an amazing project, because it has tied a lot of these areas together. However, you have Midtown and you have downtown Decatur Square. Those are probably the two largest walkable areas inside the perimeter, but you need a car to live here. You just do. You need a car. If you don't have a car, you're going to be relying on buses because MARTA, the heavy rail public transit, is very limited. You're probably going to have to drive to the station to utilize the rail. I think that's what most people do. You could get lucky and live walking distance to one of those stations, and if your job or wherever you go most is walking distance from where you're going, the station that you're going to, then maybe you could get by. But this really is not the city to live in without a car. I just have to be honest with you. The traffic is bad because of that, because there are so many cars on the road. Now, the Beltline has been definitely a breath of fresh air. It's not the only solution to all our problems. However, it definitely is one of the best amenities to be developed in Atlanta ever. So yeah, you should just be aware of that. I'm always surprised by how many people are not aware how sprawled out Atlanta is. These roads were built for horse and buggy, so it's not a nice little grid like you'd see in New York or DC. So just be aware that you're gonna need to own a car if you live here, and you're gonna be in your car quite often. So if you don't have to move here because work is relocating you or for some other reason, but you are looking to move to an affordable city and you're looking at the Southeast for a lot of the reasons that I've already mentioned, you may be deciding between cities in the Southeast. And I talk to a lot of clients and help them make this decision. And sometimes Atlanta's just not the right place for them based on the criteria that's most important to them. So just want to briefly talk about some of the other common areas these people look at and what to think about in making this decision. Now, I would say, well, let's talk about the other places that you might look to live, right? So if you're looking at the Southeast, right, you're going to be looking at Texas, of course, right? Most often Houston, but we'll just say any of the cities in Texas. Obviously, some more expensive than others, but Houston is the one that's most commonly compared to Atlanta. There are obvious benefits to a place like Texas, such as no state income tax and affordability. I think cost of living overall is going to be a win for Texas compared to Georgia, generally speaking, because of those two reasons I just mentioned. And of all the other cities you could consider in the Southeast, I think Houston is the only one that's going to be comparable in terms of just the size of the city and the amount of amenities available to you. Most of the other cities that we're going to talk about are a decent bit smaller, which is fine, but some people like big cities and they like the endless amenities and job opportunities that those cities offer. And so of all the other places that we're going to talk about, Houston is probably the most comparable. It's also extremely spread out, extremely diverse. So honestly, your decision between these two, if it's not cost of living related, it might be climate related. What kind of atmosphere do you want to live in? Do you care about nature? Do you care about the nature-related amenities that are going to be close by to you? Other places you may be looking at, Florida, of course. This is actually the most common place that Georgians relocate to is Florida, and vice versa. I made a video on this, but Georgia and Florida love to exchange residents. I think more so than any other states do. Now, there are a lot of cities in Florida, right? So you could be coming from Miami, you could be coming from Tampa Bay, and obviously the differences between those and Atlanta are going to vary quite a bit depending on what city that you're coming from. But living in the state of Florida obviously is going to mean certain things like, again, no state income tax, but also climate, right? You're definitely not going to have the diversity of climate, the change of seasons that you're going to have in a lot of the other areas of the Southeast that we're going to talk about. You also have to consider natural disasters, and I should have mentioned that for Texas too, right? You want to be paying attention about these power grid failure issues, and if that's something that you're going to have to account for in your day-to-day lifestyle there. If you live in Florida, you're going to have probably some sort of hurricane preparedness, and you're going to deal with home insurance. That's probably more expensive than average, and if you ever have to get your roof replaced, it's getting really difficult to do that. So you want to ask yourself if those are the kinds of things that you're ready to deal with. And of course, depending on the city that you're looking at in Florida, it could be maybe a little more similar to Atlanta. It could be extremely different from Atlanta, like Miami. But of all the states I'm going to be talking about here, Florida, I think, is the most distinct just in terms of the climate, the architecture, the things that you have to consider with the natural disasters, and also your budget. It's getting very expensive to live in a lot of places in Florida. So if you're looking at one of those larger cities, it's very possible your dollar's still going to go further in Atlanta. All right, what about the Carolinas? This is probably some of the biggest competition for Atlanta when attracting talent from across the country, or just people looking for more affordable living. And we could be talking about Charlotte, we could be talking about Raleigh-Durham, we could be talking about Greenville. I think the important thing to consider here is that this is just going to be a much smaller city, smaller town vibe than what you'll find in Atlanta, Georgia. These cities are growing tremendously, and maybe you want to get in the ground floor of a smaller city that's growing quite a bit, which is the case for most of the cities in the Carolinas. But if you just need an endless amount of options for things to do, or you just like the big city feel, lots of people, you're not quite going to get that as much in any of those cities in the Carolinas as you would in Atlanta. However, I should say in most instances, your dollar probably will go farther in those cities. So if you're working on a tighter budget, then that may be a good option for you. And of course, for all these places, we want to consider the job industries that are most prevalent here, so you know if you're going to be able to work, right? You want a lot of options. And unfortunately, with the smaller cities, they're just are typically less diverse in terms of the industries. So, if one sector fails in that city, it can have an outsized effect on jobs in the area. Whereas I mentioned before, Atlanta has such a diverse economy, it's going to be stable even if one sector takes a major hit. You might be looking at New Orleans, which is one of my favorite cities in the country. However, that's got some unique challenges as well, right? Especially related to hurricanes and how that can affect your day-to-day life. Crime is a pretty big factor to consider in New Orleans. Unfortunately, it is quite hot. And you want to talk about humidity. Louisiana puts us to shame. So if you've got an issue with humidity, that might make your decision there for you. Now, I love New Orleans, and I would legitimately put the food scene far above Atlanta, which I sure won't make everyone happy. But that is honestly how I feel. I love the culture and feel of New Orleans. It's very distinct, and that just might be your flavor, or it might not be. But again, the major ones that I mentioned are probably going to help you either cross it off the list or look at it further. Or you could be looking at Tennessee, right? A city like Nashville, which is a great city as well, and obviously offers a very unique cultural feeling based around music, country music, great bar scene, but certainly a much smaller city than Atlanta. So again, the size of the city I think will help you quite a bit in making this decision, and the distinct features of the state, whether it be income tax, or whether it be the type of laws that are in place, gun laws. You should look at all this stuff. So that's just a quick rundown of other places that people tend to look at when they're considering the Southeast, and maybe some of the factors that you should consider in helping narrow this down for you. All right, as usual, I'm babbling and running on, so I'm going to try to wrap this up and give you just a way to look at this, very quick, neat, and tidy to simplify this in your mind. In my opinion, in the Southeast, Atlanta is the best blend of big city amenities, with fantastic nature all around you and close by, no consistent natural disasters that are going to impact your day-to-day living, still relatively decent affordability in your cost of living, and a lot of opportunity in your career. That is how I would encapsulate the best of what Atlanta has to offer for someone considering a big move. And if you want my advice on the 4 most important factors to consider for a move, number 1 would be career path, right? You gotta make money. And so you wanna move to a place where you feel like you're gonna have a lot of opportunities to start or grow and explode your entire career. You're gonna wanna consider your budget, right? You need to be able to afford to live in the place that you want. And a lot of people wanna be homeowners. And so that should be within reach for you based on your income. You should consider the climate/weather. You don't want to be miserable throughout the year, and you don't want to be surprised by having to be prepared for hurricanes, a few months out of the year. So you definitely want to know what you're getting into in terms of the climate and how that affects your day-to-day living. And 4th is lifestyle and things to do. Are you a single person that's just getting started on your career and you want to meet new people and have lots of opportunities and experiences? Or maybe you're more established, you've got a family and you've got school-aged children that need great quality public schools. Now, those situations tied in with the budget that you're working with and the other factors that I mentioned should really help you clarify things. If you have kids and they need to be in good public schools, but you're only working with a budget of $300,000 and you want to purchase a home, or you want to rent and you're working with a small rental budget, Atlanta may or may not be the right place for you. You may have to look further out away from Atlanta or look at a overall much cheaper market altogether. So overall, I would really just encourage you to think about what is most important to you and your family. What are your priorities so that you can make sure you check those boxes off before a lot of the other smaller stuff. And this is the same process and issues that I go through with clients that I help buy or sell homes. It can be a daunting process with a lot of factors to consider and more easy to lose sight of the prize than you would think. So a lot of my job is just gently steering people back into what they told me was the most important factor for them and their family, so that at the end of the day, after you've closed on your home or you've settled in your rental and now you're living in your new city, at least you know you checked off the boxes for what was most important to you. So there you have it. Sorry for rambling. Let me know if you liked the video. Let me know what other content you want to see. And thank you for watching. And give me a call if you need help buying or selling a home in Atlanta. See ya.